Can China beat India in a war of 2022? China and India are two neighboring countries, who have a large population and a sizable army on both sides. In fact, China and India are ranked third and fourth in global ranking of military strength, behind US and Russia. China has been following an expansionist policy towards all its neighbors, under the communist rule, and has only become more bellicose, since Xi Jinping took over the top position, in 2012. In the recent years, China has shown eagerness to flex its military muscle with US, Australia, Japan, Philippines, Vietnam, Taiwan, Canada, United Kingdom, many other Asian and European countries, and India. Communist China has always looked at India as a permanent competitor, who will overtake them sooner than later. So, they've festered a hostile intention towards India, since 1949. In today's world, if Xi Jinping decides to go to war with India, the world can't dissuade China. And all India can do is prepare militarily, and build the right alliances, in order to defend themselves against the Chinese aggression. Now, we'll answer the question we posed. Can China defeat India in a war, if they decide to do so? A short answer will do no justice, and we want you to join our journey in exploring the current strengths and weaknesses of both these Asian giants. Let's list a couple of assumptions we're making here. First, we'll assume that no other country jumps in to help either India or China. Second, let's assume that neither India nor China uses nuclear bombs, though we'll compare their nuclear arsenal. China has been growing in its economic might for the past 40 years, and has used it to become militarily more powerful during this period. Using a simple comparison, it may appear that China should have an easier time in winning over India, but it's never that simple. In the last war that China participated, which was in 1979, against Vietnam, Deng Xiaoping had vowed to teach a lesson to Vietnam, since China had a huge advantage in numbers, but were badly beaten in the end, instead. After its loss to China in 1962, India has fought 3 wars with Pakistan, in 1965, 1971, and 1999, and one with China, in 1967. And India came out victorious, in all 4 of them. We'll do a quantitative comparison, as well as a qualitative analysis, and also go into other factors, that will determine the outcome of a war between the two countries, India and China. China has about 2 million active personnel, and India's active personnel is about 1.5 million. However, compared to the 1.2 million reserve personnel of India, China has only about 510,000. Let's compare the artillery strength of the Chinese and Indian armies. Both India and China have third-generation tanks, but the numbers are higher for China. The artillery power of China includes third-generation main battle tanks, MBT, like Type 99A, and Type 99, which total 1,100, and second-generation tanks of 2,500 Type 96, along with 300 Type 88 tanks, 200 Type 69 tanks, and 2,400 old Type 59 tanks. India's equivalent third-generation main battle tanks, the Russian-made T-90 tanks, are around 2,100, apart from the indigenously built Arjun MBT, and Tank X, a combined total of around 400 tanks. India also has around 2,500 T-72 tanks, which is an earlier generation to the T-90 tanks. China has 35,500 armored vehicles, compared to 12,800 for India. China also has a huge numerical advantage to India, in self-propelled artillery, by 4,100 to 100, and in mobile rocket projectors, by 3,150 to 1,400. However, India is ahead, in towed artillery to China, by 3,400 to 1,700. The quality of both the Indian and Chinese tanks have come under severe scrutiny, and criticism. Most of the analysis are always done by Western military analysts, and writers, who have a vested interest in promoting their own national battle tanks for exports. In fact, many of the writers are journalists in popular military journals, who are in the payroll of defense manufacturers, or were former defense contractors themselves. So, it's very difficult to trust their quality assessment. The Indian tanks have been deployed on wars, and have proven they're worth a lot more than the Chinese tanks. India has recently achieved success in its own indigenous design, with Arjun tanks. It has traditionally relied heavily on Russian tanks, like T-90 and T-72, but made significant improvements on them to suit their specific needs. Russia had transferred their technology to India, due to its long-standing defense cooperation. On the other hand, the Chinese tanks have no track record to prove if they are battle-ready or not. Most of the training for the Chinese are given on their obsolete 1950s Soviet tanks, namely the Type 59 tanks. This can be a huge disadvantage, since no tool is good, unless you know how to use them, and the Chinese army is currently not fully trained handling their own tanks. In terms of navy, China has a big numerical advantage in ships, destroyers, and submarines compared to India. And some reports put that the Chinese Navy is even ahead of the USA, which used to hold the top spot for a long time. Of course, the US Navy is way too sophisticated and militarily well equipped, and it's not a proper comparison at all. Let's break down the numbers of the Indian and Chinese Navy. The entire fleet strength, not including the smaller ships, is about 300 for India, and for China, it is around 800. China has 79 submarines, compared to India's 17 submarines. Out of the 79 Chinese submarines, 62 are conventional, and 17 are nuclear. Out of India's 17 submarines, 12 are conventional, and only 5 are nuclear. China has 41 destroyers, while India has 10 of them. China has 49 frigates, while India has only 15 frigates. And most importantly, China has 2 aircraft carriers with 1 in construction, and India has 1 aircraft carrier, with 2 in construction. It does appear that China has an overwhelming advantage, compared to the Indian Navy. However, India and China don't share a maritime border. So, the chances of a direct naval conflict between India and China is not very high. If China decides on a naval warfare, it has a long distance to cover before it can attack India by sea, and in the process, has to travel hostile waters, including the US Navy, which have been patrolling in the seas on the way. China has a lot of conflicts with countries all along the sea route before it reaches the Indian coast. The chances of logistics and supply disruption is high, resulting the naval sustenance a lot harder for China. Most importantly, China has to cross Strait of Malacca to reach the Indian area. This strait is a long, narrow passage of 930 kilometers or 580 miles. The Andaman and Nicobar Islands of India expands the Indian maritime boundary very near the Strait of Malacca, and the Indian Navy is well positioned to give hell to the Chinese Navy when they cross this strait. China has a naval base in Djibouti, Africa, which can be used to attack the Western Naval Command of India. However, this can turn into a bigger nightmare for the Chinese, due to the delay in supplies reaching from China. So, in short, Chinese superior navy does not give a real advantage to China, and has a potential of even being a liability. Let's now look at the Air Force. In terms of Air Force, the numerical difference between India and China is less significant than their navy. India has a total of around 2,200 aircrafts, whereas China's total near 3,300. Out of the total, China has a 2-to-1 advantage on fighter aircraft of 1,200, to India's 581. China has 371 attack aircrafts, compared to India's 130. The number of transport aircrafts between China and India are about the same. China has 286 of them, while India has 253. On helicopters, China has 912, while India has 805. The remaining air power are spread about evenly. As far as the Indian aircrafts, most of them were purchased from other nations, mainly Russia, which have been battle-tested, and some of the jets are considered the best for warfare. India has moved into some domestic production recently, with their light combat aircraft. The purchase of Rafale jets from France, and American C-17, and C-130J planes and Chinook helicopters, along with sophisticated electronic technology, from US and Israel, has made India move away from their heavy dependence on Russia. Most of the Chinese aircrafts are made in China, and have not seen any battle. There have been several serious performance issues with Chengdu J-10, and Shenyang J-16, and the effectiveness of these advanced jets will decide if China retains the edge, or not. However, China has purchased modern Russian fighters including Sukhoi Su-35, apart from their earlier versions of Sukhoi Su-30 and Su-27. But, there is one major issue for China, if they need to attack India using their air force. China's borders with India include the large Tibetan mountainous region, which is so far away from the major air bases of China. The lack of good air bases is a huge problem for China for launching an attack, though they are trying to build some in Tibet. On the Indian side, since they have better airfields and bases, they definitely have a superiority there. On top of that, the Indian acquisition of S-400 anti-air missiles will make the Chinese Air Force think twice about any misadventure. Let's look at the raw numbers on the nuclear arsenal, for comparison. The number of nuclear weapons for India is supposed to be about 160, compared to China's 280, though the numbers are not independently verified. If nuclear weapons are used, the war can get really ugly, with millions of people dying on both sides of these densely populated countries. The first line of attack by China may start with infantry movement towards the Indian side. But, India has a significant advantage on infantry. The terrain bordering India and China, through Tibet, is entirely high mountainous, and India has one of the best trained army in mountain warfare, anywhere in the world. Indian army undergo tough training in mountain warfare, since they have to fight both their potential enemies Pakistan and China in the Himalayan mountains, in case of a war. On the other hand, China has been having a habit of picking many enemies, and so it needs to prepare its army on multiple terrains. India and China have agreements in place not to carry weapons on their border patrol. Ignoring such agreements, on June 2020, China made a surreptitious, surprise, well-planned attack on the Indian soldiers, in the Galwan Valley, killing 20 Indian soldiers. Though the Indian soldiers were unarmed, and were caught by surprise, they managed to get a handle soon, and killed an estimated 40 Chinese soldiers, which also resulted in injury to a large number of additional Chinese soldiers. This came as a rude shock to Xi Jinping's army. Despite violating the rules of engagement, and attack India by treachery, they still failed miserably. It remains to be seen if China will attack again, or will accept a truce with India, in the near term. However, it has to be noted that China enjoys a tactical advantage. Being a totalitarian communist regime, China can afford to force their army into dangerous missions, without any backlash, whereas the civilian leadership of the democratic India will be answerable to its citizens and media. In conclusion, China is highly unlikely to defeat India in a conventional war. However, as we have seen throughout history, wars have a life of its own, take its own course, and are highly unpredictable. It's impossible to predict the exact extent of damage each side will suffer. It can be safely assumed that there will be heavy losses of life, and damages to property, and the overall economy, on both sides. We hope better sense prevails on the Chinese leadership, and they are not tempted to make a unilateral move of aggression against India. Thanks for watching.